If you aren't at the engagement dinner tomorrow, don't bother coming home for Christmas. We're removing you from the deed to the cabin. The text arrived at 11:51 p.m., glowing blue in the darkness of my Austin penthouse. My father, Kevin, didn't waste time with greetings or guilt. This was a tactical strike. He knew exactly what that cabin meant, or what he thought it meant, to me. It was the only piece of tangible history I had left. I sat there for a moment, the silence of the 42nd floor pressing against the glass. Below me, the city was a grid of electric light, but up here it was just me and the ultimatum. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I simply unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. Face ID unlocked the screen. The numbers appeared, crisp and undeniable. $2,400,000. I studied the balance. Then I looked back at the thread on my phone. And then, for the first time in years, I laughed. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The laughter wasn't joyful. It was the sound a lock makes when it finally clicks open. My father thought he was threatening a daughter who needed him. He didn't realize he was negotiating with a bank he didn't know existed. They call it glass child syndrome. It's a term I learned years later, but I lived it every single day in that suffocating, beige house in Chicago. A glass child is the sibling of someone who demands so much attention, whether through illness, disability, or in my family's case, sheer, unadulterated mediocrity, that the parents look right through them. My brother Tyler was the golden boy. Not because he was brilliant, but because he was loud. He was the sun my parents orbited, and I was just the empty space between the planets. When Tyler got a participation trophy for debate club, my mother threw a dinner party. When I won the state coding championship at 16, they forgot to pick me up from the venue because Tyler needed a ride to lacrosse practice. I learned early on that excellence was not a currency they accepted. Silence was. So I became silent. And I became expensive. I left for college on a scholarship they didn't know I applied for. I graduated at the top of my class while they were helping Tyler move into a fraternity house that cost more per semester than my entire education. They skipped my graduation because Tyler had a crisis. His girlfriend broke up with him. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just packed my car and drove south. I built my life in the shadows. I started as a junior analyst, fixing data breaches for companies that didn't want to admit they'd been hacked. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by caffeine and the cold, hard resolve of someone who knows no one is coming to save them. By 25, I had founded my own firm. By 26, I was consulting for state governments. Now, at 27, I was a ghost to them. To my parents, I was Sydney who works with computers. They thought I was struggling in IT support, fixing printers and resetting passwords. They liked that version of me. It made Tyler look better. But the reality was sitting in my bank account. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The reflection staring back wasn't the scared little girl they remembered. It was a woman who charged $500 an hour just to pick up the phone. The cabin was the only thing they had on me. It was a rundown A-frame on a lake in Wisconsin, bought 5 years ago when my dad's business was struggling. What they didn't know, what they refused to see, was where the down payment had actually come from. I had wired them $50,000 from a work bonus. They took it, never asked questions, and put my name on the deed as a formality. Now, they were using my own money to hold me hostage. Tyler was marrying the daughter of Senator Davis. It was the social climb of the century for my parents. They needed the perfect family tableau. They needed the dutiful, slightly less successful sister to stand in the background and look adoringly at the golden couple. If I didn't show up, the image would crack. I looked at my phone again. The timestamp read 12:03 a.m. I typed a single word reply. Okay. Then I opened my laptop. I didn't need to scream. I needed to execute a transaction. I pulled up the contact for my lawyer, a shark named Marcus who handled my business assets. I drafted an email, attaching the original wire transfer receipt from 5 years ago and the mortgage documents I had secretly acquired from the bank's distressed asset list 3 days prior. You see, I hadn't just paid the down payment. When my dad stopped paying the mortgage 6 months ago to fund Tyler's engagement ring, the bank quietly put the note up for sale. I bought it. I wasn't just on the deed. I was the bank. I hit send. The air in the penthouse was cool and conditioned, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive leather. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic, emotional heat of my childhood home. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, sterile air of independence. I wasn't going to the engagement dinner. I wasn't going to be a prop in their political theater. I was executing the empty chair defense. It's a concept I use in negotiation. Sometimes, your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. If I went, I was validating their narrative. I was proving that their threats worked. I was showing them that I was still the glass child, transparent and fragile. By not going, by leaving that chair empty at the senator's table, I was turning a mirror on them. If my absence ruined their perfect family image, then the image was never real, to begin with. The email to Marcus vanished from my outbox. The first domino had been pushed. I closed the laptop. The city lights of Austin winked below me, indifferent and beautiful. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. Tomorrow, the senator would ask where I was. Tomorrow, my father would try to make good on his threat. And tomorrow, they would all learn that glass, when broken, becomes a weapon. I didn't answer his calls. Not the first, not the second, not the 15th. I watched my phone light up, vibrating against the marble countertop, a frantic little insect trying to get my attention. I finished my water and went to bed. I slept 8 hours, dreamless and deep. The next evening, while my family was undoubtedly performing their act for Senator Davis in a private dining room 2,000 miles away, I was in my home office, reviewing a contract for a new client in Dubai. But I could picture the scene perfectly. My mother, Lisa, would be wearing her political wife dress, navy blue, pearls, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kevin would be pontificating about family values and legacy, words he used like currency but never actually backed with gold. Tyler would be charming, vacuous, nodding along, desperate to secure his future without having to build it himself. And there would be an empty chair. I imagine the senator glancing at it. A man who built his career on reading people, on noticing details. The dinner began at 7 p.m. Central. At 7:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Morgan, my business partner. She was monitoring the social channels just in case. Radio silence, so far. But the senator just checked in at the Capitol Grill. I went back to my work. At 8:15, my phone rang. It wasn't my dad. It wasn't my mom. It was a number with a DC area code. I frowned. I didn't recognize it, but in my line of work, you answer calls from DC. "This is Sydney Vance," I said, my voice professional, detached. "Ms. Vance." The voice was deep, authoritative, but laced with confusion. "This is Senator Robert Davis." My heart hammered once, hard, against my ribs. Then it settled. "Senator, good evening. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I'm at dinner with your family," he said, the word family carrying a strange weight. "We were discussing the upcoming infrastructure bill, and your father mentioned something odd." I leaned back in my chair. "Oh." I asked about his daughter. "He told me you were struggling, that you were finding yourself in IT support and were a bit unstable." I closed my eyes. Of course. They couldn't just say I wasn't there. They had to destroy my credibility to explain my absence. They had to make me the problem, so they could remain the victims. "I see," I said. "The thing is, Ms. Vance," the senator continued, "I have a consultant named Sydney Vance. A consultant who billed my office $50,000 last month for a complete overhaul of our district's cybersecurity. A consultant who saved us from a ransomware attack 3 weeks ago." The silence on the line was heavy. "Is that you?" he asked. "Yes, Senator. That is me." "And these people, Kevin and Lisa, they're your parents?" "Biologically, yes." I heard a sharp intake of breath. "They are sitting here, Ms. Vance, telling me you are a charity case. They are telling me they support you financially." A dry, humorless sound escaped me. "Senator, you have my invoices. You know my rates. You can do the math. I can, he said, his voice hardening. I can indeed. Please give them my regards, I said. And, Senator, check your personal server logs tonight. I noticed a few irregularities in the access protocols from your future son-in-law's device. Excuse me? Just a professional courtesy. Good night, Senator. I hung up. I stared at the phone. I hadn't planned that. I hadn't planned to expose Tyler. But if they were going to paint me as unstable, I was going to show them exactly how stable and how dangerous I actually was. 5 minutes later, my phone exploded. Kevin calling. Lisa calling. Tyler texting in all caps. What did you say to him? Pick up the phone, Sydney. You ruined everything. I didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of wine, a vintage Cabernet I'd bought to celebrate closing my first $1 million deal. I walked out onto the balcony. The air was warm, thick with the scent of jasmine and exhaust. I imagined the scene at the restaurant. The senator returning to the table. The look on his face. The questions that would follow. The stammering explanations. The slow, agonizing realization that their lies had just collided with a reality they couldn't control. They had tried to erase me. They had tried to make me small so they could feel big. But you can't erase the person who built the system. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like iron and victory. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. But before the angry voicemails could fill my inbox, I had one more move to make. I called Marcus. Is it done? I asked. The paperwork is filed, Marcus said, his voice crisp. The eviction notice is being served this morning, along with the demand for repayment of the unauthorized loans they took against the equity. Good. Sydney, Marcus paused. Are you sure about this? This is scorched earth. They threatened to cut me off, Marcus. They threatened to take the one thing I had left. I know, but they're your parents. No, I said, watching a hawk circle the thermals above the city. They were my landlords, and their lease is up. The call ended. It wasn't revenge. That implies emotion. That implies I was doing this to hurt them. I wasn't. I was doing this to free myself. I was balancing the ledger. They had taken and taken and taken my confidence, my childhood, my credit, and now the bill was due. The phone rang at 7 a.m. sharp. I knew who it was before I even looked. My father, Kevin, operates on a very specific frequency of rage. He marinates in it overnight, letting it stew and thicken, until he feels justified enough to unleash it with the sunrise. I picked up on the second ring. I didn't say hello. I just listened. You ungrateful, vindictive little. His voice cracked, high and thin. It wasn't the booming baritone of the patriarch anymore. It was the screech of a man losing his grip on the steering wheel. Do you have any idea what you've done? Senator Davis left before dessert. He walked out, Sydney. He walked out on your brother. I sat on my balcony, watching the Texas sun burn the mist off the Colorado River. I assume he had some questions about your accounting, Dad. Don't you get smart with me, he roared. You humiliated us. You made us look like liars. You are liars, I said, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. You lied about my career. You lied about my mental health. You lied about your own finances to impress a man who values integrity above all else. I just corrected the record. You ruined Tyler's life. Tyler ruined his own life when he tried to hack a federal server from his iPad, I countered. I just pointed out the vulnerability. He was breathing hard now, short, jagged gasps. I could hear the desperation clawing at his throat. He had lost the senator. He had lost the social standing he craved. Now he needed to hurt me. He needed to reclaim the one thing he thought he still owned, me. Fine, he spat. You want to play hardball? You want to be independent? Let's see how independent you are when you have no history. I'm calling the lawyer today. I'm taking you off the cabin deed. I'm burning that bridge, Sydney. You will never set foot in that house again. It's gone. He waited for the beg. He waited for the apology. He was expecting the scared little girl who used to cry when he threatened to give her books away. Instead, I took a sip of my coffee. You can't take me off the deed, Dad. Watch me. It's my property. No, I said softly. It isn't. Excuse me? I bought the note, Dad. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. What are you talking about? You stopped paying the mortgage 6 months ago, I explained, keeping my tone conversational, almost bored. You used the money for Tyler's engagement ring and the country club dues. The bank categorized the loan as a distressed asset 3 weeks ago. My holding company acquired it on Tuesday. I paused, letting the reality sink in. I'm not on the deed, Kevin. I'm the bank. And you are 3 months in default. You can't. I can. And I did. Marcus served the eviction notice this morning. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Eviction. He sounded like he was choking. You're evicting your own parents. I'm foreclosing on a non-performing asset, I corrected. It's just business. Isn't that what you always told me? It's a tough world, Sydney. You have to be tough to survive. Well, I survived. This is what psychologists call a narcissistic collapse. I could feel it happening through the phone. It's the moment the false self, the grandiose, infallible image the narcissist has built their entire life around, shatters against the hard rock of reality. It wasn't just that he was losing the house. It was that he was losing to me, the scapegoat, the glass child, the invisible one. In his mind, I existed only to reflect his light or to absorb his darkness. I wasn't supposed to have power. I wasn't supposed to be the one holding the gavel. His brain couldn't process a world where I was the superior force. It was a cognitive short circuit. He stammered. I raised you. I gave you life. And then you ignored that life for 27 years. I said. You didn't raise me, Dad.
You housed me.
And now, I'm returning the favor by unhousing you. We have nowhere to go, he whispered. The rage was gone, replaced by a terrified, infantile confusion. You have Tyler, I said. He's the golden child, right? I'm sure his brilliance will save you. Or maybe he can ask the senator for a loan. Oh, wait. Sydney, please. I make more in a month than you made in a decade, Dad, I said, delivering the final mercy kill to his ego. I could buy that cabin 10 times over with cash. But I don't want it. I'm selling it. I'm erasing it. Why? He wept. Why are you doing this? Because you taught me well, I said. You taught me that value is transactional. You taught me that if you aren't an asset, you're a liability. And Dad, you're a liability. I terminated the call. I didn't block the number this time. I didn't need to. He wouldn't call back. The man who had terrorized my childhood with his disappointment and his threats was gone. In his place was just a debtor, a man who had gambled his family on a lie and lost. I stood up and walked to the railing of my balcony. The Texas heat was rising, shimmering off the pavement. I felt clean. I felt light. I had spent my whole life trying to be seen by them. Today, I forced them to look, and what they saw blinded them. The collapse of a house of cards is surprisingly quiet. You expect a crash, a thunderclap, something to mark the end of an era. But mostly, it's just the soft shhh of gravity taking over. In the 48 hours following the eviction notice, my family's carefully curated existence didn't explode. It dissolved. The first domino to fall was the engagement. Senator Davis didn't make a scene. He didn't scream or shout. He simply issued a press release on Wednesday morning stating that his daughter's engagement to Tyler Vance had been amicably dissolved due to irreconcilable differences in values. In political speak, that is a guillotine. Tyler didn't take it with dignity. My phone lit up with a barrage of texts that were less coherent sentences and more spasms of pure, unfiltered entitlement. He left me. You poisoned him against me. I hope you die alone with your money. I read them while drinking my morning espresso. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt the clinical detachment of a pathologist examining a tissue sample. Tyler wasn't mourning the loss of a relationship. He was mourning the loss of his future. He was mourning the Senate seat he thought he was owed, the trust fund he thought he'd marry into. He was mourning the fact that for the first time in his life, being the golden boy wasn't currency. It was a liability. I didn't reply. I didn't try to explain that I hadn't poisoned anyone. I had just handed the senator a flashlight, and he had chosen to look in the dark corners. I pressed block contact. The silence that followed was luxurious. The second domino was the social circle. In the world my parents inhabited, the country clubs, the charity galas, the HOA board meetings, reputation is oxygen. And I had just cut off the air supply. News of the eviction spread through their suburb like a virus. Marcus, my lawyer, told me that the moving trucks arriving at the cabin had been spotted by a neighbor. The gossip mill did the rest. The narrative shifted overnight. Kevin and Lisa weren't the benevolent parents supporting a struggling daughter anymore. They were the frauds who had been living on their daughter's dime while lying about her sanity. They weren't victims. They were pariahs. I heard from a cousin that my mother tried to go to her weekly bridge game. No one would make eye contact with her. She left after 10 minutes, weeping in her Mercedes. I felt a twinge of something, maybe the ghost of the daughter who used to desperately want to protect them. But then I remembered the dinner parties where they laughed about my little computer hobby. I remembered the graduation they skipped. I remembered the text threatening to erase me from the family history. And the ghost vanished. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Grandma Betty." I hesitated. Betty was the only one I hadn't blocked. She was my father's mother, a steel-spined woman who mostly kept to herself in Arizona. I braced myself for the scolding. I expected the family is family speech. "Hello, Grandma," I said, guarding my tone. "Is it done?" she asked. Her voice was raspy, dry as desert sand. "Is what done?" "The demolition." I paused. "If you mean the eviction, yes. They have 27 days left to vacate." "Good." I nearly dropped the phone. "Good? Grandma, I just evicted your son." "Kevin has been a leech since he was 16, she said, the words sharp and unyielding. "He borrowed money from me for years, Sydney. He told me it was for your education. He told me it was for your medical bills. I found out 3 years ago he was using it to lease cars and pay for Tyler's lifestyle." My grip on the phone tightened. "You knew." I suspected. "But I'm old and I'm tired, and I didn't have the fight in me to stop him. I watched you, though." Her voice softened, just a fraction. "I watched you leave. I watched you build that company. I saw your name in the business journals. I knew you didn't need my help." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you didn't need a savior, Sydney. You needed to become the executioner. If I had stepped in, you might have forgiven them. You might have stayed trapped in their web, thinking you owed them something. I had to let you get angry enough to burn it down." Tears pricked my eyes, hot, sudden, and surprising. It was the validation I hadn't realized I was still craving. The matriarch of the family hadn't been blind. She had been waiting. "They're ruining my name," I whispered. "They're telling everyone I'm cruel." "Let them talk," Betty said. "Cruelty is what weak people call justice when it finally catches up to them. You aren't cruel, Sydney. You're efficient. You broke the cycle. That is the only legacy that matters." "Thank you, Grandma." "Don't thank me. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't give the cabin back. Sell it. Turn it into ash and cash. Don't leave a single brick for them to hide behind." "I won't," I promised. "Good. Now go back to your empire. You have work to do." The line went dead. I put the phone down and walked to the window. The sun was setting over Austin, turning the river into a ribbon of fire. The fallout was over. The dust was settling. My brother was blocked. My parents were packing boxes in a house they no longer owned. My grandmother had given me her blessing. I was entirely, completely alone, and I had never felt more whole. If you are currently the glass child in your family, waiting for them to finally see you, stop waiting. You aren't transparent because you're weak. You're transparent because you're made of diamond. Start building your own empire today. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs the courage to walk away. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you are building just for yourself? I want to know. Don't forget to subscribe. Class dismissed.